All right. Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you might be coming from. My name is Devin. I am an alcoholic. And thanks, Donna and Terry. And that's funny. I didn't actually know that, Terry, that we had connected before you'd gotten sober and then shortly after. That's really cool. Um, yeah, I'm an alcoholic. I do have a sobriety date, which happens to be August 28th of 2011. My home group is No Serenity Till Brooklyn, as it was just shared. And I'd say most importantly, I'm a member of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'm happy to be here. Although my sponsor is good about making it clear that convenience is not a spiritual principle. And getting here today, although here consists of, having to just have access to the internet or a phone that works. My calendar completely rearranged itself from the time we had committed to doing this until today. So I'm actually sitting in hopefully a quiet room at a theater where I'm going to be here working for the rest of the day when we get done. So I won't be able to stay for the whole time. So I apologize in advance. Um, our book talks about the stories in the back of it. And if you'd have to have an actual book with the stories in the back. So that we're telling the truth and we're not saying we have a bunch of stories in the back of the book that tell how each member establishes their relationship with God. Because if you have the small book, we kind of lie to you because we tell you that there's stories in the back and we don't print them, which I kind of find is interesting. But if you have a book with the stories in the back, it says the point of those stories is it's an opportunity for members to write how they have established a relationship with a God of their understanding. And I think that's really what the stories in AA are all about. If you've had a real first step experience, and if you really have felt what it means to be powerless over something, then it becomes pretty clear that the only reason that I'm sitting here sober today is the grace of a loving God. That I'm not here figuring out how to live better, managing myself, learning how to make better choices, working on my defects. Like none of that is actually in line with what this program suggests we do. That this is a program of surrender. That this is not about learning how to live different so I can go out and be self-sufficient again. This is about learning how to be God reliant. Um, and so that sobriety date of August 28th of 2011 is interestingly not the day that I quit drinking. I don't know about y'all, but I tried to manage and change my relationship to alcohol a lot. I had a lot of other stuff. I had a lot of other things going on. I'm definitely an alcoholic because I have the physical allergy. Once I start drinking, I can't stop, and I need to keep drinking. And I've never drank what you might call normally. My wife can drink normally, and she demonstrates what that looks like every once in a while because that's about how often she drinks is every once in a while. And when she does drink, she will nurse a drink for like an hour and a half sometimes. And I don't know what that looks. I don't know what that is. I've seen her pour a glass of wine and forget she's drinking and like leave it in the other room. And I go in an hour later in the middle of the movie when we take a break and I find a glass of wine in the front room and I'm like, bring it to her and go, did you want this? And she literally looks at it like it could have been a glass of water. And she's like, oh, the wine, sure. I've never had a relationship to alcohol that looked like that. I drank to get drunk, and every time I drank, the whole purpose was to feel it, and what it feels like for me was deep relief. Relief from something deep within myself that I didn't know I needed help from or release from. And the first time I got drunk was the first time I got a window into how uncomfortable it had been to be me. And so, following that out, it's not a big jump for me to consider that if I found something at 12 or 13 years old that allowed me to feel comfortable in my own skin, to feel like I was enough and I belonged, that my mind is going to latch onto that and make this, and suggest to me on a regular basis that I try to do that all the time. And that's effectively what I did. And by the later high school years and later teens, that's what I was doing. And, there's a lot of drama that shows up. But ultimately, what it leads to, I think, for most of us is the same, that alcohol stopped working. And what that looks like is when I was sober, I was miserable. That was my problem always. That's why I'm drinking, because life sober is unbearable. And so if life sober sucks and you can find that life, intoxicated is better, then yeah, you're probably going to choose that. That's my choice. And then when you're intoxicated, still sucks, then you find yourself in a weird place. And this is, I believe, what the literature describes as the jumping off place. And I made it there. And that was not, that was probably like late 2010, early 2011 is when I really feel like I started to find myself in the jumping off place. And the book describes it as the place where you can no longer imagine uh, living with or without alcohol. And you're going to wish for the end. And I made it there. And what wishing for the end looked like for me was that there was a good chunk of time where I woke up on a regular basis wondering if today was the day I was going to take my life, because the suicide plan became the operative working plan of my life. If I had some goals, if I was going to get, I needed a certain amount of money. So I thought to be able to enact this plan that I had. And so if I was going to go under that amount of money, then I was just going to zero it all out. And I was just going to go try to die alone in a car somewhere off in the woods or something, like about as selfish and self-centered as it could get. Um, but so that I ended up coming to AA. I'm going to try to condense this because 14 years of sobriety, I'd rather talk to you about those years than the preceding 24. Because I think it's more important. And I think that's why we're here. But I need you to understand that what it looked like. Because I think at the core of what we're doing here, if I'm not able to convey my powerlessness over alcohol to you, then why would you ever listen to what I have to say about spirituality? I'm not here as an educator. I'm not here to teach anybody anything. But what I have is some experience of being completely and utterly broken and hopeless. And today, that's not where I am. Um, and so I'd been exposed to Alcoholics Anonymous at 18. I had been in a treatment deal at 18 because I was doing some other stuff. And the family caught wind of that, and they were kind of worried about my safety and all those things, and they locked me up. And maybe you guys have had the forced abstinence plan. The forced abstinence plan from my family did not work for me. I went to Alcoholics Anonymous because I was told that I had to do that in order to go to the East Coast to a school, and I did all that. And I look back on that time when I was 18, and I realized I didn't even qualify to be a member, because the only requirement for AA membership is a desire not to drink. And at 18, when I was forced into treatment in AA, I did not have a desire not to drink. And if you're here and you don't actually have a desire not to drink, I would suggest don't be here. Don't ruin it. Don't come here for somebody else to do something where you might come back and say, well, AA doesn't work because I went to those meetings and it didn't work. Like get broken and then come here, because that's the only opportunity that's the only time that AA worked for me, is when I was absolutely broken. And so I came here for, I don't know how many, 90 days. And then I left and I took a drink and I was intoxicated basically the clock around for the next 6.5 years or 6 years or whatever it was. And then I actually developed the desire not to drink. And I had a guy that was the happy sober guy. And he was from Hawaii. And I thought maybe it was because he was from Hawaii and grew up on like a cacao farm, that's why he was happy and sober. I didn't know, I'm from like Indianapolis and suburbia Chicago. It kind of sucks out there, in my opinion. Sorry if you're there and you love it. That's awesome. It's not for me. And so I was like, maybe it's Hawaii, right? Because that's how my mind works. Is it can't just, it's got to be something that I didn't have, right? That you can't just be happy like this and positive and good vibes, Will. But there was a moment where I found out that Will used to party and he didn't, and we had a conversation. And all he simply said to me in that phone call was, "Hey, man, I go to AA and it works for me." And I'll tell you that Will didn't talk to me about 12 steps. He didn't talk to me about literature. He didn't talk to me about meetings or a fellowship or anything. He just told me very simply, "I go to AA and it works for me." But what Will did do was that he lived this beautiful program in front of my eyes. He was the lived demonstration of love and tolerance and patience and kindliness. He was someone who was walking through the world who actually made it abundantly clear that he cared about you. And he would look you in the eye and he would zero in on you and he would listen to you and he would give you his time and he would give you his attention. And it became very obvious that this person had something going on that I didn't have available to me. And so when that kind of a person gave me a simple message, "Hey, I go to AA and it works for me," that kind of stuck in the back of my mind. So when I'm waking up suicidal, I have this memory of Will. I have this memory of being 18 and people coming to visit me in the youth rehab, and the AA stuff is starting to percolate in there. And so I looked up a meeting on my own in early June of 2011. And for the next almost 3 months, I got acquainted with what it really means to be powerless over alcohol. And I had the visceral experience that I hope everybody has, which is that I woke up every day and I said, I need to get sober or I'm going to kill myself. And I would scream into pillows and I would try to get over to a meeting and I would be around you guys and I would try to stay sober the best I could. And every single day I took a drink and found myself in a blackout and I started to wonder what was wrong with me. So I didn't understand that I had alcoholism. And I'm sure people were talking about it. I just wasn't able to hear it. But on August 28th of 2011, I was surrendered. And what it looked like was very simple. I took a burning desire in a meeting that I didn't have any intention of talking at. You ever had that? You're not like I had a plan. I'm like 3 hours sober and I'm at a meeting and they're talking about step 8 and I'm raising my hand to say something because that's what I think AA is. You go to the meeting and you talk. That's what I see modeled in front of me is you're supposed to check in, or it's like, my friend Heidi said it best. She goes, my sponsor made it very clear to me when I was new that AA is not a hotel. We don't go to check in. This is not we're here to just, dump our stuff in a room full of people. This is like an opportunity where sick people come together and can get well. And so I don't know what was being said. I just know that I didn't hear much because I couldn't hear. But that particular day, I found my hand raising during a burning desire, and what I heard myself saying was, I'm screwed, I'm effed, and I don't know what to do. But if I'm not surrounded by you people or at another one of these meetings, I will be drunk and high later. It's going to happen. It's been happening every night. And we stood up and we grabbed hands and we said a serenity prayer. And I find it's really hard to pray on Zoom because there's internet and latency. And if we all unmute, it's going to sound like we're falling down the stairs trying to pray together. I usually take the earbuds out and just pray and I come back and you guys are like just finishing the first line. But if you're in person, like in this meeting 14 years ago, when we grabbed hands and we said this prayer, I felt like I was in the prayer. And I was holding hands with strangers and I don't come from a religious upbringing. I didn't have a God of my, I never had a God concept. I never prayed. That was not a part of my life. And here I am closing a meeting with a room full of strangers saying a simple prayer. And I just got that little chill down my spine feeling. And for me that, I've always, I guess, equated that with you're in the right place. And so the way that seemed to translate to me was this is for you. That whatever's going on right here, right now in this thing called Alcoholics Anonymous, this is for you. And I think that was the day I really joined AA. That was the day that I said, whatever you guys are going to have me do, I'm going to do. And I've been sober ever since then. And I don't understand that, because I am incapable of not drinking. I am incapable of living a spiritually principled life. It became abundantly clear to me when I started looking at inventory that the story of who I am, the person that I believed I was, the way that I thought I was presenting to you, was about 180 degrees away from the actions that I'd actually been living out in the way I had been in relation with the people around me. I mean, I got sick to my stomach looking at the conduct inventory because it became abundantly clear to me that I didn't really see women as people or value their existence at all. And every part of my, experience of any kind of intimacy or any kind of relationship was all predicated on selfishness and self-centeredness and self-serving. It was just me trying to use somebody for what I felt was something that was owed to me or I deserved. And the reality is, the more I looked at my reactions to people, the more I looked at the basis of my resentments being rooted in fear and rooted in self-seeking and selfish, mostly I'm just a prideful, arrogant prick a lot of the time. I mean, I really struggled with self-righteousness and I really struggle thinking that I just know better than everybody. And the reality is maybe a lot of times I do, but that doesn't matter because I'm the one who's walking around in the world trying, having a mind that actively wants to separate me from you. And what I know today is that whenever I'm separating myself from you, I'm separating myself from my creator. And I don't want to live a life today of separation. I don't want to live a life today where I'm out here judging people. I don't want to do that anymore. Not because a sponsor told me not to, not because you guys suggested that was something to do, because in my heart, I'm not okay living like that. Some of the biggest grace that I've gotten from sponsorship is I've never had somebody tell me what to do. And that might not work for everybody, but for me, that's been the most helpful people in my life have been the people that suggested that the real answer here is I need to get quiet and I need to seek a relationship with the God of my understanding. And I need to utilize these tools and then share openly with some people in my life. But the question that they've always come back to me whenever I've had anything going on is they go, well, is that objectionable to you? And what I've learned is it kind of comes back to me not having a desire not to drink. Until I think there's a problem, I'm not really going to ask God to help. And so if I'm not willing to actually address these things, then maybe I'm not really willing to be changed. And so, I've written a lot of inventory. I had to write some inventory less than a week ago. I had the thing go on Sunday and it's not, none of it's important, but once again, I get to see the same thing that, ultimately I just want people to treat me differently or be differently. I've got some fear wrapped up with my image and my vanity and how people look at me. I think I'm smarter than and know better. And, and it's funny because I keep waiting for like a new thing to pop up on those inventories. And it's pretty much always the same stuff. And I just kind of laugh because it's like, all right, well, there's me again. But I can tell you the experience that I've been having recently is I believe this is what my experience is kind of dictating that because I've been willing to keep looking, because I've been willing to hold myself to account, and then I've been willing to share openly with a good chunk of people. I mean, the sponsees that I have, these guys, I'm on the phone pretty much daily with people that um, are also interested in living this program, and they're the ones that are getting the active stuff usually. And then, once a week when I'm on the phone with my sponsor, if I've had to write something out or I have something come up, he's getting the full rundown of what happened. Um, and then I have like a monthly, like a once a month usually group where we get together and we do like a deep dive through our lives. So I have a handful of people that get to see me. And I really try not to hide anything because I found out that that's really a big problem is if I'm out here trying to guard myself, that's usually a good, a good indicator that something's not doing too hot in my life. Um, One of my heroes that passed away a couple months back said, he just said, stop defending yourself. Like if you're out here trying to defend yourself, like stop, like, go be you. And if you got some faults, welcome to the club. We all have faults. No one in here is perfect. Um, I literally sent an approach to an amends that became clear to me before I got on this phone call with someone at my home group. And it was a direct result of an experience that happened to me on Sunday, writing the inventory and then talking to my sponsor about something completely unrelated. And what it came to be clear to me was I may have actually put somebody in my home group in a similar situation to how I was feeling in this situation that took place on Sunday. And as we talked it out and we were sitting there, I said, this is really interesting because now it's making me think back to like 6 weeks ago when we talked about this situation at a business meeting at my home group. And I go, man, it's kind of clear to me that I might have actually caused this same feeling that I have to this person at my home group. And if I did that, I'm not okay with that. And that's been, I guess, the journey of this stuff is it's not people scolding me or telling me that I'm doing wrong or I'm bad. It's people lovingly allowing me to use them as a resource to bounce stuff off of them and to come to the conclusion that like, I'm not willing to live a life today where I'm hurting people. Now, that doesn't mean I'm not going to hurt people or I'm not going to say insensitive things or I'm going to not have a mind that goes nuts. But the goalpost here is I'd like to live a life of unconditional love and be able to actually be present to the people around me, to actually go out and really show up in people's lives in ways that like my buddy Will could do. And again, like Nowhere in the steps have I learned how to be able to do that on my own. What I've learned though is that God can make that possible. And so the whole goal for me today is, I need to make sure that I'm actively adhering to a few simple things that seem to open the channel up and allow intuition to start actually flowing. Um, my mind has been really loud lately. Whenever I get just a loud mind, and I think I started to say this has been my experience. My experience, though, is that while my mind has been really loud, it doesn't seem that the actions are connected to the loudness of my mind. And to me, I think that is a massive gift. And I think that's hopefully what this is actually pointing to. That I've been really trying to zone in on a 10th step. And for those of you that might be newer, the 10th step talks about we're supposed to watch. So continue to watch for selfishness, dishonesty, resentment, and fear. And it suggests that like these are going to crop up. And I read a little book that's not an AA book, but it's written by some people that are in AA called Unpopular Practices in the Last Three Steps or Unpopular Studies in the Last Three Steps. And it's about, yay big, maybe like 60 pages at best or something. But what they really drilled in on was the idea of watching. And and I'll tell you that there was a period of sobriety where I was an 11th stepper. Like I had that, the morning practice, the evening review every single day. We were writing the evening review. We were in meditation every morning. We were really getting that 11th step cranking. And I want to say it was probably like a year to a year and a half where I didn't miss a single evening. And I would sit down every night and open the notebook and I would write. And the amazing thing happened. Every day I felt like I was writing the same stuff of what I could have done better and where I had, screwed up and what I was afraid of or where my selfishness was. And there was a day where it just became obvious. It's like, hey, you seem to be really good at waking up and getting quiet and having this morning routine and inviting God into the day. But it seems like you just kind of get up and leave God at the kitchen table and are like, hey, dude, I'll see you later. I'll let you know how I do. And then I would go out into the world and live my life and do what I thought was supposed to happen. I'd come back and give him like the progress report of how I'd royally screwed up for the day. And I can't remember if it was someone that I had listened to. I think the intuition just showed up one day and it was like, hey man, maybe you really need to try to bring God into everything you're doing. And is that not actually what in my opinion, that's the real direction of the 10th step. You could say 10 and 11, I'm not going to get into semantics and debate any of this stuff, but right on, what would it be, page 85? Says every day is a day where we must bring the vision of God's will for us into all of our activities. And I've looked at that line a bunch over these years. And what I can tell you is from my perspective, there's no wiggle room in there because every day seems like every day. It doesn't say like excluding bank holidays or, your birthday. It says every day. Um, and it's not a suggestion that I should try to. It says I must. Now, the caveat in there is that's impossible because I can't deal in a world of perfection. But I think the idea here is that every day I should try to see if I can go out and live in the essence of what I think God's would have me be. And the more I consider that, the more I end up in one place, which is unconditionally loving. And I've talked to my sponsor a good bit about what does it mean to actually be unconditionally loving. And we were going through the traditions and we were looking at how those 12 traditions can not just apply in my AA group, but they can apply in my marriage, in my home, just in daily living and any group activity that I have another set of things to consider. And I remember I looked at him, I said, well, so Mike, let's look at this eighth tradition. We're forever non-professional, but our service centers may employ special workers. I go, how does that apply in my everyday living? And he got quiet and he said, well, the subtext here a lot of times is what we do in AA is for fun and for free, that we don't charge for our 12-step services. And I said, yeah. And he said, well, do you give away your love for fun and for free? Do you give away your kindness for fun and for free? Or do you put conditions on those things? And he started opening me up to different ways of how I could look at some of these ideas as simple as, oh yeah, it's for fun and for free. But do I answer and treat my wife with the same kind of compassion as I do the newcomer at the home group or the person that calls me that's really in trouble? Do I treat everybody in my life like I do that new person that I think I can help in AA? And I started to realize there was some glaring gaps in that, and that's been a big thing on my mind the last, I don't know, 8 months or so of, man, I might have a lot of growth here to really look at where can I be unconditionally loving or where am I being conditionally loving? Um, but back to this 10th step thing, if I think that that's the goal, to try to bring God's vision into all of my activities or God's will for me into all my activities, it opened the door for me to realize that it doesn't really matter if I'm willing to check myself at the end of the day, because if I'm going out and living my life the entirety of my day, I'm going to keep making the same mistakes. And I'm just going to come back and give God this like really bad progress report of how I'm doing. And so what has become more the practice for the past chunk of years, and it's very slow progress. So maybe it's just because I'm a slow learner, but I think it's really difficult. But to really try to actually bring God into everything I'm doing. And man, that's hard. I've done things like starting a note in my phone where as soon as I notice that my mind is wandering or I'm getting a little bit frustrated, I try to just start marking down all the different moments when I get distracted, going to social media, when I'm starting to drive and my mind starts yelling at the people that don't know how to drive, all the things that, I've just literally tried to start like notating that stuff. And within a few hours, you'll have like a really detailed list of a bunch of stuff, at least if you're me. And it was eye opening to show me how fast and how loud my mind will just start yelling at the world around me. Um, it appears, though, it appears that while my mind is still doing those things, because I've been willing to watch it, what is happening now is I am watching the loud mind more than I am identifying with the loud mind. And I think that might be the greatest gift of what this is. The greatest thing I've been understanding recently is I am not my thoughts. That, I think a lot of us would talk about that for a while, but I am not me. Me seems to be the created idea of who I thought you wanted me to be or who I think you need to see me as. But that person actually has no real bearing in who I am. Who I am seems to exist way deeper in my heart. And I think that's really the journey of what learning how to build a real relationship with the God of my understanding is it's about walking me away from this really loud, sick, chaotic mind and into an open and loving heart. And I think that's a daily practice. I woke up and um, for whatever reason felt great and then like had a really weird, interaction with my wife where it's clear that I'm frustrated, not with her, but she's like looking at me like, why do you seem so frustrated right now? And I'm like, I don't know. I got to get on a train. I got to go into the city. I got to do this thing. I got to play 2 shows. And it's like, wait, no, I don't have to do anything. Like, I have an opportunity today to live a big and full life. I have an opportunity to try to be available and serve the God of my understanding. Um, to me, that's a privilege. That's not a chore. But I have my mind that will see that as a chore. Um, I will say this. I'm really grateful that I had a sponsor that pointed out that the ninth step says we made direct amends, which he said was actually to the people we had harmed, to all persons we had harmed. And he asked, and he goes, "The word all is pretty clear, right?" And I said, "Yeah, all's pretty clear. Thanks, Bart." Um, and it said, "Except when to do so would injure them or others." And he said, "To make it abundantly clear, you're not them and you're not others." And I'm really grateful that I've had sponsorship that did suggest that you can make all your amends. Not everybody's going to want to see you, but that's not what we're talking about. You know, I hear a lot of people talk about living amends. To me, this is what a living amends looks like. I sat down with my family, and when I asked them what they needed me to do, they said, "We just want you to be happy, and we want you to, keep doing this thing and be a part of our lives." So the amend was me actually sitting down and taking accountability for the harm I had done and coming to them and saying, how could I ever make this right? But the living part of it was not me deciding what I'm going to do to fix it, but is actually to listen to what they suggested, and they said this is what you can do to make it right, and then follow through on that. So it's been 12, 13, 12 years since that actual conversation. It seemed appropriate to not sit down with the family until I had 2 years sober, because they got the 911 calls, they got the jail collect call, they got all sorts of stuff to the house, and um, for whatever reason, it felt like we needed some time there where we were talking and we were building a relationship, and then I surprised them at 2 years sober, and we had a real like sit down, and have a conversation with the three of us, my parents and myself, about this whole thing. And so their direction was, we just want you to be sober, and we want you to be happy, and we want you to go live this big full life and be a part of ours. We don't want your money. We don't want anything from you. Just want you to be happy. And so the living part of the amends is that's a never ending amends. Even if when they are not here, if I want to honor the spirit of what they wanted for me, it would be to continue to live this program, continue to go out and be in the world having a big full life. Um, which I would say is a lot different than assuming I know how to make it right to somebody else. And I don't know where that came from, but I've seen a bunch of stuff pass my way in the last couple of months from people where it's like we have this assumed idea that I've harmed you, yet I know how to fix it. And I don't know where that came from. But and if that's what has worked for you, then like rock on. But the school that I was brought up in is, I have no idea what my actions actually did to you. And so my job in an amends is to sit down with you and to ask you to explain to me how I might have impacted your life, and open the door to actually listen to this person that I haven't really ever probably listened to most of my life, and find out what they need me to do in order to make it right. Um, I will tell you that my mom in the pandemic joined Al-Anon. And what she told me was, because we started to have a completely different relationship, and we started to talk about spirituality, and she started getting all these books that I was reading, and she would ask me what I'm reading. I would just buy her these books and start sending her all this stuff. And um, her experience of Al-Anon when I was in treatment was a bunch of people complaining about their significant others. And her and my dad were suggested to go by the professionals at that center, and they both looked at each other after a meeting, and they said, why would we ever come back? So what she said to me was, the change that I witnessed take place in your life was so severe that it piqued my interest about Al-Anon, and it just kind of kept a little sliver of that door open. And my mom is now a 5-year member of Al-Anon, and had reached out to me, and I got to connect her with a friend of mine, or a few friends of mine. But she ran into, no surprise, the people that I recommended were big book Al-Anons. And so my mom got to be taken through the book Alcoholics Anonymous from the Al-Anon perspective. And then she came to me and said, hey, I'm on my 9th step, and I feel like I owe you an amends. And that was never in the cards. And at first I said, well, you don't owe me anything, but like, let's sit down. And I had the opportunity to sit down and have a conversation on the other side, where my mom had taken a look at how she felt like she had failed as a mother, or the things that she had done that she felt were wrong. And it became clear to me that on some level she felt like she was responsible still, or had some way that she could have helped me to not be an alcoholic. And when she asked me the question I had asked her, what can I do to make it right? All I could do was look her in the eye and say, I just need you to forgive yourself, because you didn't create my alcoholism. And furthermore, if you take a step back, you can see that because I'm an alcoholic, and because I got brought to Alcoholics Anonymous, and now she's been brought to Al-Anon, that we get to have this amazing relationship today, where we both are in a completely different place than we would have maybe ever been had I not been an alcoholic, had I not been forced to really reckon with the fact that my life being run on self-will is not working. So it's been a really amazing journey to get to watch that. She's like getting involved in service below the group level, and has a home group, and it's wild. And I will say, I had an amends that finally came to happen this past year, and it was like a 10-year in the making amends, where I'd gotten the middle finger, don't ever talk to me, from a lady, and so I never reached out, but I was willing to reach out. I was willing to make this amends. She'd made it very clear that my job was to never talk to her again. And she actually did reach out to me this year and said happy birthday to me on my birthday. And I took 10 minutes, got quiet, and I responded. And we
Well,
got to get together maybe a month later. And, and it was, I had all these ideas of how I had ruined her life. And at the end of it, she just looked at me and she goes, at that point in my life, I was really not capable of taking care of myself. And I was making a lot of bad choices. And, you were just kind of one of those bad choices. So nothing like getting knocked down at the knees a little bit to realize that I'm not that important. I'm not that powerful. I got 10 seconds, and what I can tell you is everything that alcohol ever gave me, I found through sponsorship. And my sense of purpose and a sense of duty in this world has been given to me by Alcoholics Anonymous. And I was looking for freedom, and I was looking for fellowship and community and all these things, and sitting down, being able to look you in the eye and tell you that if you don't ever want to take a drink again, you don't have to. And I can show you a way of living that has really worked for me, and I believe it could work for you. Is really given me everything that I think I thought alcohol gave me. And so I would encourage everybody to get busy here. There's a lot of people that need a lot of help, and if you've got a little bit of experience with any of these steps, you can be useful to someone who doesn't. And everything that I ever did that I was ashamed of is shown up through the lens of sponsorship as an asset. And so yeah, we need to go out there and help each other. We need to love each other, and I think that's the whole point of this deal. And I'm just really grateful that became my purpose. So I love y'all. Thanks so much for letting me share, and thanks for inviting me.
well, thank you, Devin. Thank you so much. Let me end the recording.